afternoon, everyone. So great to see you all here. Thanks so much for taking the time out. I hope you all enjoyed the Raya festivities and had some quality time off with your family and friends. It's great to see you all back here, raring to get on with starting your sustainability journey. You, by now, would have completed 5 lessons in this program. Sustainability 101, followed by waste management, energy efficiency, water management and renewable energy. We're pleased to hear the feedback from the surveys that most of you have found these sessions to be beneficial and that you have started to put what you've learned into a plan for action. And we're delighted to see many of you returning each week to learn even more. It is truly gratifying. We're now into our final 2 sessions, as you can see on the screen right now, and these will be structured a little differently. Having sat through the first 5 sessions, we asked you what specific areas you required more help with as you put your learnings into action. Based on your collective feedback, we have grouped your additional learning requests into the following clusters: baseline measurement, energy management, solar energy, waste, and finally, people, specifically around education, raising awareness, changing mindset and behaviors. A few of you are also looking for advice on careers that focus on sustainability. So we will cover the people segment at our final session on 1st of June, the culture of the organization, how do we get people on board, how do we build momentum? And for today, we will cover the other topics. Now, one of you wanted to understand more about carbon markets, which of course is really important. While this subject was not part of the beginners program, we do think it will be helpful to introduce the topic. In the 12th Malaysia Plan that was announced in September last year, the government is considering implementing carbon markets to help us achieve our net zero goal by as early as 2050. Additionally, if your business is part of the global supply chain, your business will be impacted if you sell to countries that impose carbon border adjustment mechanisms. For one, the European Union by 2026. So for these final 2 coaching sessions, I am delighted to bring back many of the familiar faces you have met in the earlier sessions. Thank you so much, Razif Yusuf, Sharif James, BK Sinha, Zaini Abdul Wahab, Davis Chong, and we have 2 new facilitators who are joining us for these last 2 sessions. Ralph Dixon, who is Director of Environmental Investments at YTL and CEO of YTL SV Carbon, as well as Harith Rizwan, also known as the Green Carpenter. Harith is the founder of the Green Factory, a family business focused on sustainable manufacturing of furniture and lifestyle products. And you can click on the link in the chat box to read their bios. We are truly privileged, grateful to be joined by such an esteemed panel of seasoned sustainability practitioners who have given up so much of their valuable time to volunteer to get you all started on your sustainability journey. Let's show our appreciation to them by giving them a big round of virtual applause, shall we? I need to look for mine as well. But anyway, you've got my applause. So we have a lot to get through today. So let's get the ball rolling. Ralph Dixon is going to kick off today's session with an overview of carbon markets. Ralph, I'll invite you to take it from here. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Datin Seri, for such a kind introduction. Unfortunately, my presentation won't be so colorful as it's quite a dry topic, in terms of getting into the carbon markets and trying to explain how they relate to business and how we are going to decarbonize and what sort of mitigation and certainly adaptation strategies we're going to be looking at. So, so I'm trying to find just let me know if you can, I hope that's on the slide view now. So what I'm going to do is cover a little bit of the global carbon markets to position where we are and why this is such a critical area, and then look into the carbon credits, just to explain briefly. Now, there'll probably be a lot more questions in terms of, digging down into those, so we could have a follow-up with any of you who have Q&A, and very happy to answer questions on that. And of course, the ecosystem and what the pricing trends look like and how they look like they're going to firm up or weaken over time according to certain supply and demand impacts. I've just put the appendices in there just for your reference in case we need to address them in the Q&A. So we'll go straight into the global carbon markets. As you know, emissions trading is not a new area, although it's certainly risen to the fore in the recent years because of the Paris Agreement, but originally it was started off in earnest during the 1997 Kyoto Protocol, which was adopted by almost 180 countries. And then it moved on to certain areas like Copenhagen, where I was present, but that's the only COP I've ever been to. I wasn't able to go to Paris, obviously, and the other ones, which then were even more critical because Paris not only decided and agreed on a 1.5 degree warming, but this was also followed up with the Article 6 in the COP in Scotland, which, as you will know, has tried to reform the compliance market or a global market from the CDM or Clean Development Mechanism, which was decided on and agreed in the Kyoto Protocol in '97. Sorry, I think the slides are not moving. There we are. So why are greenhouse gases so critical? For every 1 degree of global warming, that's a 1 degree average increase globally, there's approximately a 7% increase in precipitation. So that's why we're seeing heat waves and floods. So it's not a constant weather pattern that we're seeing emerging, but this extreme weather events that are taking place globally. Recently in India and Pakistan, you know, fatal weather events with very, very high temperatures. Floods following that in certain places like Australia had fires, and then they had floods, same thing in the USA. So what we see is more precipitation, but this is more spread out rather than more evenly placed over the year. So these extreme weather events are caused obviously by the greenhouse gases that trap the heat under the atmosphere, and that results in global warming. Obviously, the measure that we use is carbon dioxide, which is the key greenhouse gas, and everything. When you see CO2e, it doesn't mean expected or emissions, it means equivalent. So all the other gases you see under here, such as methane, nitrous oxide, all have different global warming potentials. That means methane, say over the period of 100 years, has a global warming potential 28 times that of CO2. So obviously, the major greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide and methane, but the other gases are equally harmful, and the global warming potential increases. When you see sulfur hexafluoride, for instance, we go to almost 24,000 times that of CO2 in terms of the global warming potential. And this is just a rough indication of where that where those emissions occur, largely in energy. But of course, there's other areas like forest fires and volcanoes and other natural activities, which may not be anthropogenic, but certainly have a huge impact on the environment. And obviously, water vapor is another greenhouse gas, but we can't claim that in the carbon cycle in this instance. What do we split these up into emission scopes. Now, this is generally accepted that scope 1 and 2 are being reported on now. And in some jurisdictions, these are mandatory. Scope 3 is slowly being introduced. But just to give you a brief overview, scope 1 deals with your direct emissions. For instance, if you're a power plant and you buy in coal or gas or any other fuel, that would go in your scope 1 direct emissions. If you're, say, a bank operating in the heart of Kuala Lumpur, you would be probably using energy from Tenaga, and that would go into your scope 2 emissions. Obviously, there's a lot more in terms of the types of emissions that occur in scope 2, including cooling, heating, and also steam. And of course, in scope 3, you're talking about your supply chains. And these are your upstream and downstream supply chains. So equally important. The scope 3 emissions are not currently mandatory, but we feel that these will be slowly introduced into the reporting requirements for a number of jurisdictions and may become mandatory in certain jurisdictions as well. Now, scope 4 you see here on the right, that's a scope that is not widely reported on and certainly not mandatory. But scope 4 is what we call avoided emissions. So if you had an air conditioner that was a highly efficient design that replaced an old air conditioning unit, which was business as usual or a baseline scenario, that new air conditioner with a much lower emission factor in terms of intensity, that would go under your scope 4. As I say, this is not a commonly reported area, so maybe we can spend less time on that. And of course, what's important is understanding what our commitments mean, or our targets or aspirations or our aims. Net zero currently covers around 90% of the formal global economy. So net zero has grown rapidly in the last 2 years and is an extremely important aim or target. Carbon neutrality is less onerous, and you can use carbon offsets in the instance of carbon neutrality, whereas net zero, you can only use removal projects. And of course, internal mitigation strategies and activities and programs are encouraged over external offsets. So when we see both these measures, you can use offsets, but in both cases, they are different offsets, with avoidance projects being able to be used for carbon neutrality. That means you can use, say, a cook stove project in Africa to avoid the carbon that you would have emitted in Malaysia, whereas net zero, you would have to use a removal project such as a forestry, agroforestry, direct air capture, or a carbon capture and storage project, and that would then account or contribute towards your net zero aspirations. And of course, the most committed level or high level of commitment in terms of the type of projects that you could use in science-based targets, you're not allowed to use external projects. No carbon projects at all are allowed, removal or avoidance. So in terms of science-based targets, and a large number of companies have now committed towards science-based targets, in the thousands globally, perhaps even 5,000 already, you are only permitted to mitigate in your operations. So science-based targets are basically aligning your own targets to the 1.5 degree Paris Agreement goals. That is 1.5 degrees warming by 2050. And as you will have seen in the news recently, we could even get there by 2030. Science-based targets give you a much more serious level of commitment and obligations, and those are much more binding than the other two targets, such as net zero and carbon neutral. So just a quick look at what carbon credits and offsets are. 1 unit of carbon credit is basically 1 ton of CO2. So when you buy 1 ton of carbon credits, you're either removing or avoiding 1 ton of CO2 equivalent, either in the country you are located in or in another region or country. You can register your own projects as carbon credit projects, and that doesn't stop you from both retiring them or selling them. But essentially, as I said, for science-based targets, you can't do that, and you would have to just mitigate internally. And carbon credits are governed by very important principles. The principles of quality are critical in the way that they are priced and evaluated by buyers. And these are additionality, which mean that the carbon credit project would not exist in the absence of the carbon credit. So the income or the revenue stream from the carbon credits must contribute meaningfully towards the project's existence. So if a project was, say, a -5% internal rate of return before carbon credits were included, but elevated to, say, 10% return after the inclusion of carbon credits, this means the project is clearly additional. There are some exceptions, and obviously those are for projects, say, first of its kind projects, which may occur in a certain country. Then we go on to permanence, like a forestry project. There's no point in planting trees if they are not in existence in 5 years' time. So permanence of a project is extremely important. Measurability, you have to be able to measure and verify those projects. So there's, again, the level of measurability. In the case of forestry projects, it is quite challenging to measure and verify these projects, but I think the technology is moving towards a stage where you can see far more accurate satellite imagery able to track and measure and verify the forestry projects. And when these are then monitored and verified, the results are quite clear. No double counting, so you don't want double counting in different jurisdictions between different countries, so you don't want different targets to be met by the same carbon project. And of course, no leakage, which means that if the project was already, say, a mangrove project in Johor, if that was already gazetted or protected by some type of regulation or a framework, then you would not be able to register that as a carbon credit project because it's already registered. Now, I mentioned earlier 2 different types of carbon credit projects: avoided and removal. So avoidance projects are basically going to be your projects which do not necessarily remove, but can contribute to removal attributes. So a cook stove project in Africa, for instance, would allow a much more efficient cook stove to be operated and distributed amongst different communities, which would reduce the amount of firewood and charcoal and kerosene. So you would have a measurable impact on deforestation in that area as well. So it does have removal attributes. But if you talk about pure removal projects, then you're talking about things like carbon capture and storage, direct air capture. Both of those technologies are nascent and they are quite expensive. Direct air capture, anything up to $800 to $1,000 a ton. Carbon capture storage, anything up to $200 a ton. And as low maybe as $80 per ton. But you can see they're still well ahead of the carbon credit price, which generally sits between sort of $5 and $15 per ton at the moment. So obviously the more difficult the process and more costly the process, the cost of carbon should be much higher to encourage or stimulate activity in those projects and investments in those projects. And certainly green finance is another such market mechanism or tool that has been created and is growing very rapidly to facilitate and stimulate activity in carbon credit projects, both in avoided and removal projects. And of course, you want to have as many impacts, positive impacts on the environment, the community, and your workplace, and of course, any other of the ESG pillars. And we generally measure these using the Sustainable Development Goals. So if you have a project which is under gold standard, you would need to tick as many of those boxes as possible. As I've mentioned, the types of carbon markets are split into 2 markets. One is a compliance market, which was the CBAM or Clean Development Mechanism market, which was created under the Kyoto Protocol. And one is the voluntary carbon market, which is the more recently emerging one. Certainly the compliance market is much larger, with a size of around 250 billion and only about 1 billion in the voluntary markets. But of course, the voluntary market is growing very rapidly. Prices have moved around a lot. As you may know, carbon prices in the 2012 fell from around $20 to 20 cents per ton. we don't see the same fundamentals affecting the market at the moment. And certainly the amount of commitments, as I mentioned, under net zero carbon neutral, SBTI, would underpin a more stable pricing mechanism for the markets now. And we think that supply and demand is more balanced. So we, with the European Union, which is a compliance market, prices have gone up a lot. But of course, the other markets, like the voluntary markets, are subject to, much more subject to supply and demand rather than allowance permit impacts. But we still predict prices to reach around $100 per ton, and this would stimulate the necessary activity to halt global warming, or at least address it seriously and meet those targets of the 1.5 degree by 2050. These are some examples of the carbon tax markets that are present in the world. Obviously, the closest one is Singapore, where we have $5 per ton, which is escalating to $25 in 2 years' time. And that is also a market mechanism for encouraging activity, both in energy efficiency, renewable energy, and consumer habits. So an equally important mechanism. And Malaysia, Indonesia, looks like they will also be coming up with a carbon tax and cap and trade system in short space of time. The ecosystem is quite complex. I won't run you through this whole thing, but happy to share these slides with you. And you can see that it involves, on one side, project developers, and on the other side, the buyers. So no change in that general demand supply. And in the middle of the demand supply equation, you have all the different stakeholders to get involved in making sure the projects are executed with integrity, measured and monitored and verified. And of course, there are different carbon standards. Verra is the most common, and gold standard is emerging as a major registry. And of course, GCC, and of course, the original clean development mechanism is being replaced by Article 6, which will hopefully spur additional investment in the compliance markets under the original plan to create a cap and trade system globally. And that should, under Article 6, be refined. And I think what we will see is hopefully a more balanced and stable and less volatile carbon market in terms of pricing, and certainly much, much more volume and transactions taking place. In fact, record issuances and retirements took place last year. So you can already see that this is not only jumping by a few percent, but in fact, almost doubling from 2019 to 2020, and then again to 2021. Trading platforms, they exist quite nearby: Climate Impact Exchange in Singapore, Air Carbon Exchange in Singapore, CBL in Europe, ICE Exchange, and these are hoping to bring transparency on pricing and volume to the markets. So these, I think, are going to help what was previously a quite opaque marketplace become far more transparent, and hopefully we will see these markets in Malaysia as well, and also Indonesia, which will then start to trade local credits. And emissions trading worldwide, there are different cap and trade systems, but the European Union still remains the largest of those cap and trade or compliance markets. Domestic crediting mechanisms exist as well, such as in Thailand and Japan and China. You will have seen a lot of recent news about China, which is about a 5 billion ton a year market. So that is also an emerging market, and it's good that they're also moving into this space with these frameworks and cap and trade systems. Of course, if you can't register a carbon credit project like a renewable energy project in Malaysia, which is generally not accepted under Verra or gold standard, then you can still issue renewable energy certificates. But those only apply to the production of energy rather than avoided emissions from a project. So they have slightly more limited application, but they are a way, of course, of a very strong market mechanism to reduce global warming impacts, such as fossil fuel projects, and replace them with renewable energy. And that is the end. I've got some slides at the end in case there's some Q&A, but back to you, Datin Sri. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ralph. Thank you. I really appreciated that overview. I learned a lot myself. I want to take a look at the slides later. Anyway, what we have coming up next week, and I'm pleased to announce that YTL is also part of this very important webinar. Fighting Climate Change with Market Mechanisms. And this is going to be organized in collaboration with the European Union and with France, the Embassy of France to Malaysia. And I think you'll also find this very interesting. So please sign up for this webinar. The link will be available in the chat box. And this is an event happening next Wednesday on the 25th of May. Now, next, we have Sharif, who is going to work through some examples of how to complete the template for baseline measurements. Over to you, Sharif.
Thank you, Datin, Sunita. Audrey, can you share the slides first? I've got a couple of slides to present, and then I'm going to go to the Excel and run through the Excel example. Okay, these are a list of the clarification requests sent in by participants. So there's seven questions here. Some of them are basically asking the same thing. I've answered question 2, 3, and 4 here in green, just for the individuals or companies who requested the information. So on question 2, to establish baseline data tracking for GHG, scope 1, 2, and 3. Scope 3 is really for the more experienced, and even at Sime Darby Property, we're just learning about scope 3 and how to do it. And by and large, it's a really embodied carbon and a few other elements of carbon emissions related to scope 3. So scope 1 and 2 is basically where you start. And it really has to start with, as I've mentioned in our first briefing, setting your own baselines and establishing your own footprint. So basically, you just need to start collecting your data in the templates we provided, or your own templates if you want, and just develop your own baseline first before you actually move on to the next step, which would be, say, setting target emission reductions, target reductions. Question number 3 here, the identification. So I think I've covered that, number 3. Question 4, how to determine the baseline year. My personal opinion and what I understand from IPCC is that there's no hard and fast rule, but you can use historical data. So like we mentioned earlier, you could use, say, last year's energy bills and last year's fuel information, and you could start to set your baseline. Or you could just start from now and you take, say, we did suggest a minimum of 3 months for preliminary, but ideally a 1 year's data is what you really need for a first preliminary baseline. After you've had some practice, after a few years, you will work out that as your business changes over time, you will need to restate your baselines as well, and then restate your targets, or readjust your targets as well. Okay, I think that's about all I'm going to cover there. I'm just going to run through the Excel spreadsheet just to check. Can everyone hear me well? Because I'm using a new speaker.
Yes, we can, Sharif.
Okay, all right, cool. Right, so I'm just going to share the screen.
Your new speaker makes you sound like Frank Sinatra.
Alrighty-o. Right, can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Should be an Excel spreadsheet. I've blown it up as much as I possibly can. I'm just going to walk the participants through. I was thinking of doing the water one, but I'll do the waste one again. So basically, we've got a waste template. So under the earlier briefing we provided templates, and we provided information on how to do your own eco-efficiency, what you'd say, footprint or tracking. So basically under that is water footprint, waste footprint, recycling footprint, carbon footprint. So the simplest ones are the waste and the water ones. So basically you just put your company details in here. Just one point from one of the questions. To use these files, you would need to create a different version for every month. So this template here is for a month, and then you would copy, and then you would create a new set, of files that you would fill in eventually. So basically, if we run through, and let's say I'm an SME and I'm running a restaurant, or I'm running a small business out of an office. So what we have here is office waste. So for example, I could type any old figure in. Let's say 1 month's worth of office waste might have been 154 kilos. This is all in kilograms, by the way. Business process operations. So for example, I'm running a restaurant. I've got a lot of plastic packaging, paper packaging, food, basically packaging waste. So maybe for the month, I've produced 200 kilograms of waste in that category. Scheduled waste is something that is under the EQA. And if you're a business that deals with scheduled waste, you are also regulated and required to report also to the Department of Environment. But often scheduled waste for businesses, unless you're dealing with, say, chemicals or things like manufacturing processes that have a lot of scheduled waste, you might only have a little bit. So let's say I've got 15 kilos for the month, and most of them are detergent bottles or chemical bottles. Food waste, coming back to the restaurant, I have a lot of customers who I tend to give too large a portion size to my customers. So therefore there tend to be a little bit too much food waste happening, and also food waste is coming from the kitchen scraps in terms of the food preparation. So let's say I ended up with 545 kilos. Green waste would be another category. Let's say you have a little bit of landscaping you had done, and let's say you had some waste that also went into the waste stream. Let's say you've got 100 kilos. You might not have any business wet waste. Then you might have some other waste, which could be, anything, maybe printer cartridges or something like that, but that might actually be scheduled waste. Let's just say there's 15 kilos of other waste. So over a month, you might have 1,064 kilograms of waste. That actually, this template has been pre-populated to give you a carbon value of 975 kilograms of carbon equivalent emissions from that waste, if that waste goes to landfill. Now, if you were to recycle your waste and reduce your waste footprint and turn it to recycling and or circular economy, or use your waste for upcycling or other purposes, and you were to reduce this, equally you could be diverting 975 kilograms of CO2 equivalent emissions. Okay, I'm going to move on. I've got 7 minutes left. I'm going to spend that on this more complex one. So I'm only going to cover, and this template only covers scope 1 and scope 2. It doesn't cover scope 3 emissions. So scope 1 emissions is largely, and scope 2 emissions is your operational carbon emissions for your company. So I've pre-highlighted the ones I'm going to fill in. So let's say on my business, I have electricity generation from generators that run on diesel or natural gas. So I've got one diesel generator and I used 75 litres. So this is in litres. So 75 litres of fuel, I fill that in there. And basically the conversion ratio of how much per litre in terms of CO2 emissions is in these columns over here. Okay. Now, the next key emission that I've been tracking is I've got some heavy machinery and they're diesel. So let's say I have 350 litres of diesel fuel that's used for my heavy machinery. I might have a business that is involved in car repair or car panel beating or something like that. It has welding machines, etc. So for welding machines, it's measured in cubic meters. So let's say I have used 45 meters cubed of acetylene gas. And that also then gives me a value of carbon, CO2 equivalent emissions. Fugitive refrigerants, I'm not going to go into detail today, but I want to highlight that there's another tab in the template that basically gives you your emissions factors for refrigerants right through here. If you like, we could send an updated one that gives the full name of HFC23. But at the moment, it's just labeled as HFC23, and these emissions factors all come from these various documents on the right-hand side in column F. Going back to the template though. Okay, So transportation, my business also has a few vehicles that go to site. For example, I'm monitoring a construction site and I've got a couple of cars, but maybe they're four-wheel drive and one of them is diesel. So I might use maybe 150 litres of fuel. Petrol, I might use 250 litres for diesel because most of my vehicles for site are diesel vehicles. Okay, I also got motorcycles. Motorcycles obviously often very common in Malaysia. So some of the site team prefer to use the company motorcycle and they don't take a lot of fuel. So let's say we've got 50 litres for the month. Light good vehicle. Let's say my light good vehicle is a van. So the van might be using 100 litres for the month. And let's say I also have a diesel heavy goods vehicle, 3.5 tonne and above. So that one is used for other purposes. It's not site vehicle, it's maybe collection of materials for my business, and I'm possibly using 250 odd litres in the month. You see when I'm putting the figures in the yellow boxes, these generated figures are coming up. So what we have is we have these figures here in column H are being produced because the template itself has got all the formulas embedded within it. So if I get X number of diesel, X litres of diesel, it will tell me how much CO2 emissions equivalent is being produced from the burning of that fuel. Okay, like we mentioned before, purchased electricity has certain value in terms of how much carbon per unit used of kilowatts, and it's different between Peninsular Malaysia, Sabah and Sarawak. So we're just going to fill Peninsular Malaysia in and we're going to say small SME and I use 1200, let's say I use 2500 kilowatts. That's going to result in 1,852 kilograms of CO2 equivalent emissions. So I filled out the template for the month of the various things that relate to my business. And basically what I have is I have a total month, I have a total value of how much carbon emissions I have from, which is basically 5,239 point, and it goes to about 5 or 6 decimal points actually. So it's quite detailed of carbon emissions. And under the scope 1, which is basically your direct emissions, scope 1 is basically the majority of my emissions. My purchase electricity, which is by and large scope 2, is a very small proportion of the total emissions for the month. Now this is operational carbon emissions and it doesn't touch on the scope 3 emissions, it doesn't touch on the scope 4 emissions that Ralph had just mentioned also. So those are something that the more experienced tend to take on later on. Just get started and work on how do you set your own footprint. Now we have offered, and we will be offering via questionnaire, question 4, I think at the end of the session, an opportunity for a more personal hand-holding session sometime towards the end of June. I think I'll finish there for now. Over to you, Datin.
Thank you, Sharif. I got distracted with personal hand-holding.
Virtual, obviously, because, you know, we want to maintain physical distancing.
Okay, all right. I'll take your word for it. Okay, thank you so much. And I hope everyone's found this very helpful, as I have. For the rest of the session, I'm going to moderate with the panelists. Kindly turn on your videos and unmute yourself based on the topics that have been requested for. And if you have any follow-up questions, or if you feel that the discussions are not addressing the issues you have, please feel free to include additional questions in the Q&A box or raise your hand and we will turn on your mic for you to speak. So let's get started. The first block of questions are on energy efficiency. People want to know more about using technology to increase energy efficiency, energy management, how to reduce energy costs in the office, especially aircon and lighting, and about generally solar systems and energy conservation, which, you know, Zaini has already covered in great detail. But maybe I can invite the panelists to just jump in with their thoughts, because obviously these questions are being asked because people still feel unclear and uncomfortable, right? What are your thoughts?
Datin, can allow me to share something?
Okay.
I cannot share now.
Okay.
Can allow me to share? I prepared some quick answer to that somehow query. So I would like to share in the slide. It's easier. Okay.
Can you please allow Zaini to share?
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much for the question. Thank you, Datin. Thank you, everyone. This is the summary from what I gather from the responses from all of you. Thank you very much for this. So I managed to extract 5, basic responses. This is some of my response to that. Okay, the first one, 1 to 3, basically for me it's the same. I'm talking about the energy efficiency of conservation, not for solar. All right. 4, if you want to save energy, either technology or by practices, whichever, either for your office, ecosystem, or any end user system equipment, the first step, this can be done instantly. If first you need to conduct some kind of basic technical assessment. You need to quantify how much potential of your savings. How to do it? You can utilize your in-house personnel. If you have engineers, maintenance engineers, and all that, they can do some basics, in-house assessment, look into your lighting system, basic ecosystem, some are low and of cost measure. They can help you to identify the potential. And then, or, if you have some, you are more serious, want to prepare to go for more detail, even prepare for investment, you can consider detailed energy audit. Detailed energy audit, of course, incurs some cost. That's why you need to be serious. Okay. Now government is applying, giving the grant, energy audit conventional grant. If you're qualified, you can apply so that you can at least you can cover the energy audit cost. And my suggestion here, all right, you should focus whatever effort, especially the one that involve investment, focus on area that area equipment or system that use the most energy. For example, if you're building sector, basically I would say 60-70% go to your air conditioning system, your chiller, your HU, your cooling tower, and all that. And then you can go for your lighting. If your factory, your motors, all the big energy guzzlers. That's number to answer 1 until 3. And then number 4, all right, how to kickstart. Let's say you want to start energy management system, for example. How to start? I have just shared with you under the chat box, right? I shared with you the basic template, how to develop the system based on the United Nations National Development Organization, or UNIDO. Yeah, I personally learn to become an expert based on that data, based on that template, more than 10 years ago. So it's very easy, all right. Of course, have a look, all right, step by step, and how information you need to fill up, what step by step, and how until your system completed. Of course, along the way, if you need any training, you have to seek all necessary training for that. Okay, number 5, okay, and then number 5, the baseline year. Actually, for energy, the simplest way or the easiest way, if you have submeter, all right. If you want to have a submeter, you have your data based on meter. If you have the energy meter and all that, look at your energy meter. The basic one, energy from the TMB. Or if you focusing on certain equipment, look at that equipment. You have submeter or not. And then the second way, before you can establish the baseline year, you must understand your trend consumptions. At least last 3 years. Is your consumption every year got some kind of patterns or totally different from 1 year to 1 year? All right. That only time when one understand that, you can say which year can be your baseline year. Not that simple. Okay. What I do, okay, to do that, come together with some basic statistical analysis, they call regulation analysis, where you can learn about the monthly trends and also analyze trend. The one I showed to you, in much last time. So it's not that simple. You got 3, 1, submeter. Second, understand your trend. And then thirdly, you can use the statistical analysis. The one requires some kind of training. And then you can confirm your baseline value. Okay, before you set your baseline value, you must establish your indicator. This is another one, you have to gain that knowledge on how to establish indicator. And then from there, you can set your baseline year. And at the same time, once you set your baseline year, make sure you also confirm and document the operating condition on that particular baseline year, baseline period. Because you want to compare later when for the subsequent year, you want to compare your performance, because you have to compare for similar condition. If additional equipment, you have to later do some adjustment, minus or plus of the consumption. All right, so that's basically my answer to that. On that, just for the sake of that, okay, I have to share one more thing. This example, quickly, just example on how I use the template I shared with you, right? Somehow how I use it for this example. Okay, this is how okay, you can get the overall template. I share you in the chat box. Yes, can you see the screen here? Why am I not moving? Hold on.
Yes.
It's still not moving. Sorry, not this one. A few more minutes left, right? Hold on. Sorry. Okay. Okay. All right. You see the screen, right? You look here. You
Yes.
see the template, right? All energy data is here. All right. And then analysis is here. And then the trend is here. Consumption trend all here. And all the trend here. And then all equipment lists are here. All right. And then they come up with this chart here. Right. Where's the largest user and all that. Okay. And then all the information, all the potential recorded here, all the saving potential are quantified here. And from here, they set the target here. They set the target here. All right. Target with the indicator, and also in this the action plan. Okay. That's all. And then this is further lah. All right. So what I'm talking about. So this is how the template I gave you. All right. The completed template. All right. That being used to develop the system step by step. Okay. So if you're interested, you can contact MySco. We have some training program on this, you know, if you want to learn further. Okay, I think that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zaini. I wanted to invite Davis and BK as well. What are your thoughts on the questions that were shared? Davis?
Hi, Dr. Seri. Hi. You mean the questions of regarding the solar installations or?
Okay, so we're currently at the energy efficiency, but
Okay.
if you want to know about technology to increase energy efficiency, yeah.
Okay. Okay. As some of you guys know, we are looking into energy efficiency. RE plus EE is always a very good synergy, like I presented previously. But we are more looking into industrial and commercial buildings that to reduce the temperature control HVAC side. So of course there are other energy efficient system like LED lighting and all this that can be installed. So I think I have little knowledge to share at the moment. But it's good to learn from Zaini.
I know. Zaini is great. BK, any thoughts?
Thank you, Datin Sri. What I'm going to say in the next 1.5 minutes is aimed for non-technical people or technical people who may try to get non-technical people to exercise some sort of EE. So the first thing is the golden rule I always use is use less. Now, what happens here in Malaysia, one switch normally can control 5 lights, sometimes 10 lights in commercial places. The first thing you need to do is you need to see if you can split that into 2 or 3 lights controlled by one switch. That way, when it's a gloomy day outside and you cannot invite daylight in, you switch on more lights. Okay, your simple index finger will be your energy efficiency tool. Next, you look at your bulb and I don't need to say further. You go for the most energy efficient bulb. You can calculate how much it's going to save you and how much more you're paying for it, and check out how quickly it'll pay back. That is the second rule. Use less as well. Use less by more switches, use less by more efficient bulbs, maybe LED. Then the next use less is see how you can invite light in from outside without inviting glare. It's a bit more complex to do, but check it out. It can be done. Now, if you are a layperson, you will think, what's next? What's next is go to RE and put solar panels on your roof. Now, all this will contribute towards the 2030 goals of halving your carbon energy footprint by 2030 in a short 7 years. So how do you calculate whether it's half or not? Very simple. If you have 10 lights and you only switch on 5, in an instant you achieved it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, VK. Thank you. If there are no other inputs, now we're going to go to renewable energy.
Can I have an input?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. It's okay if I share just one slide now. Okay, right now. Okay, you see? You guys can see, huh?
Yep, Ken.
Okay,
Thank
so hello everyone. I'm Haris. I'm also known as the Green Carpenter. Just a little bit of introduction about me. I run a furniture manufacturing facility in KL, and the company is 29 years old. I'm the second generation for the business, and we have been in the sustainability wood products for 10 years now. So I started off as just looking at material as one of the solution to going green, but as we grow and we look further into sustainability, we created a framework where how SME or normally on the can adopt sustainability, but it's more of a bird's eye view of things. So when we talk about sustainability, it's not about just the material, it's about the whole process. So in our manufacturing, we look at not just the material, the glue that we use, the coating that we use, the packaging, and even the design and all the process. And we try to make each process greener. And at the same time, we work with stakeholders. So these are the makers, the community, the media, even the government, in terms of getting sustainability buy-ins from these stakeholders. So within these few years, we have seen a lot of benefits of having sustainability in the heart of our company. And that's why I have took the role of activism, where we want to get more businesses to adopt sustainability. So looking at the circle here, this is a simpler way to look into it, because I deal a lot with small businesses, and they might have problem having someone to do all the templates and all that. So this is some of the things that I recommend as well. As well for new companies that wanted to adopt sustainability, but in a way that it's more easy to understand. So that is why we study all the process that involved in the operation, and we try to make each which is the low-hanging fruits. So as we know, it's a journey. So we cannot do all at one go. So we choose which one makes the most sense. For example, how we start it, we look into material. So we use recycled wood, recycled material, and all that. And the next thing we look into is the manufacturing side. So that is when the energy efficient machines or the design, the processes. So my suggestion would be look at all the process. Of course, you have a lot of templates to choose for, but the idea is it needs to be start with something low hanging, meaning that you don't have to buy new machines. You don't have to use expensive raw material to start. And one of the examples that I normally suggest would be, instead of looking at the products, you can also look at other things. Like maybe you don't touch the product, but you look at your operation. Maybe you go into paperless. Because once you go paperless, you reduce costs in terms of your paper, your ink, and all that. And it's easy to digitalize everything. So that inevitably save the company money. And at the same time, you can look at other things like when we talk about energy efficiency. Sorry, the intro is so long. But when you talk about energy efficiency, when we move to the new factory, the old factory is based in Sungai Buloh. So the building is a bit not designed in a proper way that there's no lighting inside. So throughout the day, we will have to use the lampu Kalimantan, the long bulb. And then when we move to the new factory, I've said to my team, we need to make this factory a concept factory. So what happened now is most of our office space, I think all of our office space, we utilize the natural lighting. We light harvest. So right now, in most of it, we don't use lights during the day. So, but of course, it's easier when you start from zero. But there are ways to look into this if you want to retrofit a building and all that to capitalize on energy efficiency. I think that's just a little bit of on that.
Thank you, Harith.
And we save a lot of money because of no lighting.
Yeah, you're always emphasizing that point, isn't it? You're doing this because it's actually good for business on so many levels.
Correct.
Right? Thank you so much. So for moving away from energy efficiency to renewable energy, solar energy, if I can invite Davis, these are points that are quite high level, nothing really specific, but maybe Davis, you can just share your thoughts, because these obviously show the gaps in the attendees' knowledge. They're not feeling comfortable in this space. What would you say to them?
Okay, I think the first, we're gonna be glad, and it is that we have programs, good programs in Malaysia, like NEM programs, previously FIT and others, for all the individuals, household, until the businesses people to participate. The most low-hanging fruit for everybody to benefit from Malaysia policy right now is the NEM program, which it consists of GITA and GITE tax incentive as well. This is the first thing that I think everybody can consider. Even we have NEM rakyat for household as well. So this one, if you're not comfortable, I think they are very simple. It's a very simple rooftop net energy metering process project for everyone to access. And the tax benefits is just until 2023, end of 2023. And there are, I will say, in Malaysia, in the past 10 years, a lot of EPCC and service provider has already well established to help anybody who is interested in solar to get into this benefit then from the ministry, from the government. I do urge people to know more about NEM program. We have about 200 mega left to be grabbed until 2025 maybe. But as far as if this 200 megawatt for rooftop is finished for NEM program, then ministry will continue to add new rooftop program for everyone to continue to invest into solar PV system to replace our fossil energy with more clean energy, especially on the we call it distributed generations at the distribution level. That's the things that I think I want to top up here, not in technical way.
Thank you so much, Davis. Do any of the other panelists have anything to add? Otherwise, I will move on to the next one, which is waste. Renewable energy through waste and current efforts in Malaysia and waste management. Who would like to address these questions?
I think I want to add a little bit on solar.
Okay.
Just a little bit lah. I think what might be difficult for a lot of company is the cost associated with having solar. However, there are a lot of way for you to manage the cost. There are a lot of incentive and all that. I think Davis is better suited to answer this. But I think to what how we can have a small step towards solar application is also having it in a smaller scale kind of usage. For example, like in our factory, we don't have solar per se, but we do have night lights that uses solar. So we have some application, so it starts something. So if you have a garden, there's a lot of those solar kind of thing where you can use, and it immediately generates benefit for the company.
Good point.
So
good point,
look at how to start small.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, thanks, Ari. Of course, it's the same concept that we always apply. We're gonna save energy first. Keep yourself efficient and save energy, but end of the day, you still need to use certain level of energy in your business operation or even household. Then those energy, you can actually use a clean energy source with the incentive that the government giving now, it is worth to do it right now.
Yeah, good points. Okay, BK, renewable energy through waste current efforts, waste management, including domestic waste and sustainability reporting standards.
Thank you, Datin Sri. Renewable energy through waste and current efforts. Well, current efforts, waste to energy is relatively small, or even perhaps not significant enough even to mention in Malaysia. So let me then talk about a little bit about what is going around the world, which we can copy. The first thing that comes to mind, especially in Malaysia, is incinerators, big ticket item, hundreds of millions of ringgit. Some people in our society love that kind of numbers. You can do it, but there are 3 caveats. If you can comply to these 3, then you can put an incinerator. Number 1, you separate your waste, whereby you look at incinerable waste versus wet waste. Okay, so you separate your waste. Number 2, you are able to constantly monitor and publicly declare real time, 24 hours a day, what toxins come out of your chimney. And number 3, you are able to give a sustainable solution to what you are going to do with your toxin-filled ashes that come out of the incinerator. If you can do all these 3, go ahead and install as many incinerators and extract energy out of the heat that you get from there and the steam, converting it into steam. Whereas compared to a glorified bin called a biogas reactor, where you just put your food waste in, how do you start the whole process? You put cow dung in for 2 weeks, let the bacteria generate, and then you put any organic waste, even paper, if you pulp it and put it in there, it will become gas, okay? But any organic waste, you get biomethane, and biomethane, you can buy a small little genset like they use in Pasar Malam for your house and put the biomethane in and generate electricity. Can it be done for individual houses? Probably not, unless you are an environmental, passionate environmental and fan. But it can be done over a community. It can perhaps light up your street lights. Perhaps it can light up every light of the porch or the gate for the community. And we could look at clever little designs which can cater for this. Can it be done in canteens of offices? What about factories that house thousands of people? So that's a very, very good, because you know what? Out of your biogas, you do good, you get organic fertilizer, which is really rich, and you can plant organic vegetables with it and enjoy the benefits of that.
Thank you.
Welcome. I actually designed a scheme where and implemented and tested it where a high-rise 20-story apartment, I collected the organic waste, I converted it into biomethane, and I converted biomethane into electricity and lit up all their LED lights on their corridors. And that was a fantastic win for that community. Waste management, including domestic waste and sustainability reporting standards. Well, we've got Act 672, which we can't even adhere to. I'm not sure we have any sustainability reporting standards, but it would be very good for people to do basic steps. How many kilos did I avert going to landfill? That's the most basic step. If you can send it through recycling streams, if you can send your waste through biogas streams, and the odd fraction of, let's say, adult and baby pampers and sanitary napkins, which you really don't know what to do, you send to landfill, you will have that much reduced to landfill. That is a very good reporting methodology. There are complex reporting standards. GRI maybe has some formats which you can look at, but really start the initiative first and think about the reporting standards.
Thank you so much, BK. Ralph and Sharif, is there anything you'd like to add?
A quick one, Datin Sri, on waste. I mean, BK has mentioned the two key areas of solid and liquid, which are obviously you have your effluent from palm oil, you have your solid municipal solid waste, and another key area that we focus on is heat. So heat generally is ignored, but heat is actually a huge resource, and waste heat is particularly valuable. So for instance, in our cement kilns, we harness about 8 to 9 megawatts of energy from each kiln. And you can do this in your home air conditioning unit as well to eliminate your hot water boiler. That means that you're harnessing the chiller heat to produce energy, or basically stored heat for your hot water. And that can be done on industrial scales in hotels. Hotels can eliminate their gas or electricity boilers for the entire hotel just through the harnessing of waste heat from the chillers. So we mustn't forget what we can't see or feel.
Fantastic.
Well, we can
point.
feel heat, yes.
Fantastic point, Ralph. Sharif, anything to add?
I think I'll pass on this one, Datin. I think
Okay,
it's been
no
well
problem.
answered already.
Okay.
I want to answer.
It's very hard to come after some of these people here. Okay,
Yeah,
now,
I want to answer.
okay, let's go, let's go.
No, because I think waste is one of the things that I'm passionate about. I've worked with recycled timber, fabric, plastic, and all. So I think what is interesting is just a case study of how we utilize our waste. As a wood manufacturing facility, we are known to produce a lot of waste. It can be like offcuts, sawdust, and all those kind of things. So what we are trying to do is we are moving towards zero waste manufacturing, where we try to minimize waste that is coming out of the factory. And one of the things that we look a lot into is our wood waste. So for example, when we make a product, like this is a serving board.
So beautiful.
And these are made from bala wood. So when we make this, there's a lot of waste being created. So these are, for example, the excess wood and all that. So normally a lot of manufacturers will throw the excess wood. But for us, we keep it and we make products out of it. Like for example, the waste just now, this is actually a phone holder. Okay. So the phone holder is, we wanted to use our waste and we make products of it, and it's actually now our bestseller. Wow. So we have sold thousands of it. So this is one of the zero waste story that we have that states that if you want to do something green, it can bring, you can make it in a way that it brings money to the company. Great. So now, so we have a lot of other things as well. We make, even right now, the sawdust we use. So we managed to reduce our waste from 30% to 5%, and we are trying to see within these 2 years to get it to zero. So when we talk about waste, there's also a different way of monetizing it. Of course, there are different kind of waste, like domestic and all that. But just to share another story, because I work a lot with company, like I think okay good for me to talk. For example, like Datai Langkawi, I consulted them on their wood waste because they are really looking into sustainable operation. And last year, December, they managed to get zero waste to landfill. So this is actually unheard of, especially for a big organization. So they managed to utilize all the waste and do it internally. So it is possible to achieve this kind of thing. Of course, they have the funding, so they can do that. But there are ways for us to move towards those kind of activities as well. So that's my input on waste.
Thank you, Harith.
Datin, I do have something to add.
Stop up a little bit, maybe. That is, I recently visited an operation from a F&B food manufacturer, processed food manufacturer, and they do have a zero waste operations, which is really impressive. And I always admire a lot of the businesses. They've been really trying very hard to improve to zero waste operations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, my minor comment. We shouldn't be looking at waste as a negative thing. The word waste in itself has a negative connotation. We should be thinking about waste as process residue. That's a term that we use ourselves sometimes. So we see that the waste can also be processed residue, which actually has another value to it. So as Haris has just demonstrated through his example, that's a good example. So that's just the message.
Brilliant point, Sharif. As a matter of fact, in the plantation sector, they call it byproducts. And just another plug for something else that CGM is doing. Many of you will already know that in close collaboration with the CEO Action Network, we organized for a series of roundtable sessions. And this year, we will also be having roundtable sessions in waste/circularity. So please sign up for that. That's also another very interesting conversation that will be applicable to many of you. So we've got another set of questions: how to identify, manage, monitor water in plantations, construction sustainability. I think, Ralph, that must be for you. Type of tool software available to perform analytical assessment and to find the conversion to decarbonization values. And of course, economic planning, which I'm sure all of you will be able to weigh in on. Does anyone want to address the first question? Otherwise, I could reach out to a plantation sector expert and we can respond to this question in writing later, so not to worry. So let's move on to number 2, construction sustainability. Ralph, this is a big question. It isn't even a question.
Thanks, Datin. It is a very broad question, and the built environment does account for up to 40% of emissions globally. So when you talk cradle to grave, it's a very broad area, and embedded carbon in steel, concrete, and other building materials, obviously even wood as well, because when you destroy habitats such as forests, you also destroy root systems and soil systems. So there is associated emissions there as well. And of course, in the construction process as well. So construction sustainability, obviously, we should be focusing on passive design. I always remember a phrase that says that waste is a failure of design. And as Sharif said, we shouldn't look at waste as a negative thing, but certainly if design is accurate, there shouldn't be waste. And in fact, in YTL, we call our waste heat recovery plants, we call them residual heat recovery plants. Because just as Sharif said, these are residual forms of resources. For the construction sustainability area, we're doing so much in the cement area in terms of blended cements, and we acquired Lafarge, which obviously has a lot of alternative fuels. So they use palm kernel shells and other agricultural waste to fire the kilns, but those are the easier emissions to offset or to mitigate. Basically to tackle the issue of calcination emissions. So that is the emissions that occur in the calcination process when you heat up limestone, it releases CO2. Those are extremely hard to abate emissions. And that's where we need to start thinking more and more about blended cement products. So using blast furnace slag, copper slag, fly ash, all these are waste products. Even gypsum and raw limestone are waste products in some instances. So the hard to abate emissions are really the ones we should be looking in steel and cement and concrete. And in fact, embedded carbon in concrete products is gaining ground, and the technology is moving forward. And there's companies like Carbon Cure, which have very advanced and sophisticated concrete capture technology, where you can capture the carbon in the concrete curing process itself. So all these are tools that we can use, but essentially it has to come from the construction industry and the developers, and of course the consumers, who have to recognize that there are additional costs or certain additional elements to factor into the passive design when we talk about these more sustainable construction materials and processes.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you. You hit the nail on the head. And for those who are interested in even more information, last year's roundtable sessions, you can go to the blog post on the CGM website and watch the replay of what was discussed last year as well. Ralph,
could I add a few points, Datin Sri?
Yeah, sure.
So to the audience, I want to say, go to www.greenbuildingindex.com.my. But if you just put in Green Building Index, I'm not asking you to use the tool. I'm asking you to look at all the criteria. The most important thing here is to be able to measure your impact of what you're doing. So look at the criteria there and choose the criteria that is applicable or relevant to you or your building, and then try to measure from before you use the criteria to after. Also, you could join Malaysia Green Building Council as a member, and it is a continuous journey for us towards sustainability in the entire building and construction industry. So you're very welcome. Thank you.
Datin Sri, I would like to chime in on the construction piece. There are 4 things that we look at Sime Darby property. We're not good in all of them. We are still on the learning journey, but these are the things we look at. One of it is what I would call when operational construction. I don't know whether that's the right term. These are the diesel that we use, and we have found that the highest diesel consumption comes from our earthworks, and we are looking and we couldn't find any solution out there that can actually reduce diesel usage during earthwork. So we're using a bit of technology, artificial intelligence, etc., use of drone in order for us to be a little bit smarter in our planning and reduce diesel emission there. The second one is methodology on construction, and we work a little bit with CIDB, moving towards IBS 70. That means how do we standardize our construction? I'm impressed by some of our peers that are using IBS a lot more, and we're also learning from others as well. Raf is on point in terms of how we design. And the practical way that we look at it is, for the premium homes, we will have more sustainability elements inside there, rainwater harvesting, solar panel, etc. And the less premium ones will then have less sustainability elements. Where we are really keen to work with people like YTL or the cement manufacturers is the use of green cement or low carbon cement or low carbon steel. We are at early stages of trying to explore this, and we are really committed to want to know better, and even maybe combining forces with our peers to talk to cement manufacturers. Lastly is waste. Construction will always produce waste. I'm very careful with BK to call it resource. Again, we are early stages working with our contractors, trying to understand how best can we do this, how can we reuse or upcycle some of the resource coming out when we do not want those resources anymore. So that's a bit of a view of a lens from a property developer.
Thank you so much, Razif.
Razif, if you buy me lunch one of these days, I might point you in the direction of where you can get 100% biodiesel from used cooking oil.
Okay, we'll do that. And I need to talk to Ralph on the cement piece.
Excellent.
I want to add some more.
Oh, okay.
I think because we are actually an interior company, so we do large-scale interior projects. We do 20-story building interiors, 100 rooms, and those kind of thing. So what we notice, or what I notice, is that we have so much waste. And of course, right now, like DK said, waste, there's a connotation to it. Right now, we use the term reclaim. So there is some value in it. But just to share some statistics, based on research, a lot of the waste being generated in construction site are wood waste, almost 70%, 69% is wood waste. So that's why we have started to, we start to look at industry waste as something of a material. Because right now, I believe that the future of material is waste. All the virgin material are getting more expensive. wood, we are seeing like ridiculous amount of increase. I'm sure it's the same for other materials. But waste, we have a lot of waste and nobody wants it. Like for example, last time when I used recycled wood, like for example, this cabinet all made from recycled wood. At that time, companies they do import export. They have a lot of pallets and crate, and normally they will stack them behind their warehouse. So it's stacked so high, and then maybe after it's too many, they have to call someone to clear it. They have to pay for clearance. So we work with this company where we take their waste and then they don't have to pay anything, and we get materials. So it's sort of a win-win situation. But this is in 2012. But after there is a trend of hipster cafe, so everyone is doing it. It's such a big thing. Everyone is doing it. Pellets have become rare. It has value. So now you are seeing like you don't see pellets flying around anymore because people pick it up. So that is how you see like a trend from how waste is just being waste to something that right now a lot of people want it. So that is my input on the construction side.
Thank you, Sharif.
So aside from the waste during the operation, we also should look into the things we put in these houses or this space, which is the interior and internal products. So we have a good guide for buildings, like the Green Building Index and all that are good for the building structure, but we have very little application or emphasis on the things internally. So that is why I think we should look as well, so we get a good overall application of sustainability in construction.
Okay, thank you so much, Sharif.
Sorry, Datin Sri,
Yes,
go to Green Building Index and look at the interior tool. There's a lot for the interiors as well.
Correct.
Okay.
So that's what, but the application, I'm talking about the more of the on-ground application.
Okay, so now we're in the glide path to the ending of this, and I want to circle back to each of the panelists to ask them about economic planning to manage the facilities. I think the question on analytical assessment and software available, we can answer in writing later on. And the question on carbon pricing, I think we can answer in writing as well. But if we were to all pull back and look at it from an economic planning point of view, what are your final thoughts? Can I just go around the table, please, and ask you to share your thoughts?
So let me try first, Datin Sri. You know, we humans are clever, but we only apply our intelligence to where there is the most amount of pull. For generations now, we have left nature or the environment as an externality and never included it in any project cost. Neither the impact during build, material selection, or operations, nothing, zero consideration. Okay, and now we've got 7 years to turn that around, and we are wondering why. I have identified a few people in my 30 years immersion into sustainability, 3 so far. And maybe I haven't looked hard enough, but they are not easy to find economists who can put a price of environmental costs and include it instead of leaving it as an externality. But that certainly, that skill has to proliferate in much greater numbers. And then we are able to consider the cost of the environment at planning stage and use strategies accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. Who's next?
Yeah, maybe I go next. I think I just want to bring up again, it's a no-brainer decisions to put, especially on rooftop solar, to apply renewable energy on your household, on your business, on your operations, everything. So end of the day, at this current moment, I think we shouldn't see a roof without solar panel on that buildings. That is, we see it as a wastage of how you can use your roof to generate clean energy, whether it's for cost savings or for environmental purposes. And we do urge everyone optimize your rooftop usage to have solar panels on your rooftop.
Thank you.
And if you want to do it through CAPEX and OPEX, zero CAPEX model, there are a lot in the program, in everywhere.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Davis. Well put.
Just one comment to finish up my side. I think too often we look at sustainability as an added cost. Coming back to also what BK said, we haven't been calculating the environmental impact in terms of economics for basically the whole industrial revolution until now. We should be looking at sustainability, especially passive design, as well as active designs in the built environment, as an added value, and it should be priced into the product. I know that price is sensitive in terms of affordable housing, etc., but there is a case to be made that the added sustainability elements, whether they be passive or active, do add value and a return on investment to the purchaser. Okay, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Sharif.
I think I can go. Is it okay?
Yes, Sharif. It is okay.
Okay, I think we need to see sustainability as a competitive advantage rather than seeing it like Sharif said, more the cost side. We should look at it as competitive advantage for company. For example, of course, it started off when we adopt sustainability, it started off as something that is good for the environment. But as time goes by, we see a lot of benefits of having sustainability embedded in the middle of the company. We have increased our profitability, our talent acquisition as well. We have a lot of people wanting to join us, and also in terms of our cost saving and those kind of things. So we live in an age right now where we have the knowledge to create a profitable business, but at the same time create a better environment or better future for our country. So that's my last
Thank
thoughts.
you so much. Thank you. Ralph, I think you were ready to speak, and then we'll wrap up with Razif. Razif, get ready.
Yeah, thanks, Datin. You know, I've been in the market in sustainability for 15 years and with YTL, and I've rarely changed my position on sticks and carrots. And unfortunately, I still see the stick as more of a way to drive change than the carrot, unfortunately. I think we will see, you know, behavioral change. We will see initiatives. I think one really good example is the way Singapore is ramping up the carbon price from $5 to $25. That is spurring a huge jump in activity, accelerating the energy efficiency, it's accelerating consumer behavior changes, and it's accelerating things like hydrogen, infrastructure, energy efficiency. So I really feel we need more aggressive carbon pricing. And I think that's what drives change. I think it's got to come from the stick rather than the carrot. And, you know, I know it's a harsh way to move forward, but I think we've gone beyond the point of being able to let people do their own thing and make voluntary or have, you know, make their own choices in voluntary activities. So I think, unfortunately, we're beyond the point of no return. We have to now make sure that there's absolutely firm action and the right type of action. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. Razif, can you be even more firm than that?
Very interesting on how Ralph gave a view, a sovereign view of the issue. I would like to translate the sovereign view to a company view, which is exactly the same. So we have been on the sustainability journey for slightly over a decade, and we've been very nice to the organization on how to do it. And things are not happening as fast as I would have liked. So what we have done in the last 1 year is, working with the board, of course, and not I do it alone, is to introduce a little bit of mandatory work, I think, into sustainability. Make this mandatory, make those mandatory. And as we have more and more mandatory elements, albeit working with the finance folks closely to make sure that cost doesn't blow to the roof, build it into a system, and we are gaining traction. Because I think Harith correctly identifies the middle portion of management that we need to work with, and by making things mandatory, I'm suddenly seeing a lot more compliance to what we want to achieve, and we can achieve things quicker. Government plays a role to make things mandatory and take out the whip. We as companies also need to take out the whip a little bit, and via systems to make sure that we comply to a certain requirement, and that will accelerate towards our ambition. Thanks.
Thank you all so much, Ralph, Sharif, Zaini, Davis, BK, Razif, Harith, for your valuable insights and guidance. As usual, I have learned so much in one sitting. Now, that was a lot of material to fit into an hour and a half. If you all found that too much to absorb, as I did, don't worry, we have recorded the session, and this will be available on our YouTube channel by tomorrow. You can access all the recordings at any time. Please share the links with your colleagues, your business partners, your friends, your family, so that they too can be inspired to start their sustainability journey. Like anything else, when you embark on a new experience, it is so much more enjoyable and more rewarding when you do it together with others. You're going to share tips and learnings, a little competition amongst friends. It's going to keep you motivated and take it to the next level. So the structure of today's session was different, and we would like to get your feedback. How was it for you? So that we can take on board your comments for the next session. The survey is going to be presented to you as you leave this webinar, and we will appreciate it if you could please just spend 2 minutes, give us your feedback. And one more thing, participants who have attended at least 5 of the learning sessions on this program are eligible to receive a certificate of participation. A few of you have responded to our survey to request for your certificate. If you have not already put forward your request, there's a link in the chat box, and you can go straight to request your certificate. Our final session in this program is going to be on the 1st of June. We will see you back here in 2 weeks' time, same people, same time, same place. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks.